Please permit me to respectfully stand protocol for this webinar as I bring warm greetings from the Office of the Senior Special Assistant Sustainable Development Goals. And I would like to read the goodwill message of Her Excellency Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, Princess Adejoke Orolope Adeflure. Thanks. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you and to deliver this goodwill message at this SDG 16 Shadow Report. Let me from the outset congratulate the leadership of the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center for consistently conducting SDG 16 Shadow Report in Nigeria. This is highly commendable. Distinguished participants recall that President Muhammadu Buhari GCFR joined other world leaders during the 70th session of the United Nations in September 2015 to adopt the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We have all come to know the 2030 Agenda envisions a present and a future that is economically sustainable, inclusive, and environmentally resilient. This vision is expressed through the framing of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 160 130 key performance indicators. Taken together, the SDGs are a universal call to action to end the planet and ensure all people enjoy peace and prosperity by the year 2030. Specific to today's SDG 16 aims to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all. Distinguished participants recall that Nigeria conducted 2 successful voluntary national reviews in 2017 and in 2020. Second voluntary national review in 2020 on sustainable development was presented to the high-level political. The VNR focused on critical issues of poverty and inclusive economy, education and gender equality, enabling environment of peace and security, and partnership for the goals. This approach was based on our national development priorities as captured in the Economic ERGP 2017 to 2020, and the cardinal objectives of President Buhari's administration, that is the economy, fight against corruption, and security. Based on our national SDG implementation plan, we are conduct a voluntary national review every 2 years. One of the key SDG 16 was that corruption remains a major challenge to overcome, and there is need to work as a collective in both public and private sectors of the economy. Indeed, we all know the relationship between corruption and underdevelopment, and we must do everything to address this challenge. Distinguished guests, just ahead of action for the SDGs, and achieving the SDGs will require a whole of society approach involving all society. I'm therefore convinced that working closely together as policy challenges, but from also and be on strategies that thus when we views of this state or non-state actors, the to recognize first what has been achieved in relation to the expected outcomes and then offer constructive the way forward. To this extent, we commend once again CISLAC for the recognition achieved, but more importantly for pointing out what remains to be done to achieve the targets reviewed under SDG 16. Distinguished parties, in line with the transformative promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, let me conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's commitment to successful implementing this. Congratulations, and I wish you all a productive webinar. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bala, for that. We appreciate those words and would take them and work with them. So up next, I'll be inviting my colleague from CISLAC, Mr. Václav Pusha, to just give us an overview of the shadow reports and just talk a little on the process before we delve into the panel session. Václav Pusha, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Václav Pusha. As mentioned before, I am no stranger to Nigeria. I have been to Nigeria for 4 years now, actually, and this project of the shadow reporting has been accompanying me almost since the day when I arrived. So I'm really glad to be here today to present fourth edition of the shadow report. Most of you would know that we publish this report every year. Last year, on the day, actually, on the 13th of July, we presented the third edition. Today, we are in the fourth edition. I prepared a small presentation for you. Let me share the screen. I hope you can hear it. If not, the secretariat will come to me. Just a moment. So here we should be in the full screen mode now. So the shadow report actually looks at the goal number 16. It's about governance, peace, and security. So of course the SDGs are extremely broad, as alluded by the OSAP's office. We, in our part, as you know, CISLAC works on corruption and accountability. We have zoomed on specifically the goal number 16, and even more specifically on 3 targets under the SDG 16. So the target number 1 is in the SDG terminology, target number 16.4, illicit financial and arms flows. Then we have got target 16.5, reduce bribery and other forms of corruption. And the third target that we look at is the access to information. Why have we chosen those 3? Well, this is well in the mandate of CISLAC and our partner organization, Transparency International. When we had brainstormed this project, we really wanted to be focused. So we didn't want to look at all the SDGs, and I think there are many capable civil society organizations and governmental institutions that deal with the rest of the SDGs, but for our part, it is about governance, it is about anti-corruption, and this is why we have zoomed on those 3. Those of you who are more interested in the terminology, there was actually a rigorous process in developing indicators under 19 policy areas. I don't want to go too much into detail again, but rest assured that the findings, if you looked at the previous 3 reports, you would find out that there are rigorous indicators that deal mainly with the existence of legal and policy framework that is in place. The evidences are there. It is not somehow our opinion on the process. We have really tried to make sure that it is not biased, it is not against the government or against anybody else. This is a process that has been consulted with our partners in Nigeria and outside. Going forward, let me go straight to the 16.4 target. Illicit financial flows and arms, illicit financial and arms flows. You may have seen that, especially those of you who follow the governance process in Nigeria more closely, you would know that there have been numerous meetings on especially illicit financial flows. As you see on the slide, Africa and Nigeria in particular loses huge amounts of money to illicit financial outflows. These are funds, this is money that leaves the Nigerian jurisdiction, almost exclusively the African continent as well, abroad in ways that are actually illegal. The biggest share of all this money is actually tax evasion. So it is not corruption. Of course, how the money is accumulated is another issue, but the biggest proportion of this illicit money that goes to London, New York, and other places comes actually stems from the fact that those in Nigeria that are rich and that have assets don't want to tax them, and they use most of the times tax havens to hide their assets abroad, and this generates the highest volume of these illicit outflows. As shown here, by the way, these figures are, especially the figures for Nigeria, are generated by the government, by institutions like Presidency Anti-Corruption Committee, Economic Financial Crimes Commission, and others. We estimate that $1 billion, 1/8. This is, I think, 3 or 4 times the budget for education, and this is huge. If it didn't leave Nigerian jurisdiction, it could be used for, of course, better purposes. This money, of course, stems very frequently from illegal acts, such as human trafficking, such as weapons smuggling, such as corruption, and others. We estimate that for every $2 that Africa as a continent receives in terms of investment or development aid, $1, half of it leaves actually Nigeria, leaves actually Africa in terms of illicit financial outflows. So you see that these are huge amounts of money leaving Nigeria. It's got to do something with lax regulation, with illegal transfer of funds, lax oversight, and also not just in Nigeria, but also abroad. We have been in talks with the governmental institutions. I think you would agree with me, those of us who are in this call and beyond, that the government of Nigeria, the current administration, they actually recognize the problem. There are a number of high-level events and working meetings and all that try to look at the problem, and some progress has been made. The banking regulations have toughened. However, it seems that if you want to launder $1 million out of Nigeria, you have a problem. But if you want to launder $1 billion, let's say, it seems that this is still possible. So in other words, it seems that especially when we go to the high end, where the really big corruption happens, there are still ways that the system cannot tackle. And these figures, the governmental figures, actually show just that. And this is reflected in our report. Under this target, specifically in this shadow report, we highlight the fact that a really important step has been made. The CAMA that the executive director of CISLAC mentioned, the Matters Act, has been passed. This paves way, there are a number of provisions in this legal framework, but this paves a way to the establishment of the beneficial ownership registry. This is a good step, but I think it is important, and let me emphasize this fact, that this has to be just the beginning. To have a law passed is just the beginning for something that has to follow. And this is, I think, something that we haven't seen yet. Of course, we don't have all encompassing beneficial ownership registry. We have beneficial ownership registry only for some sections. You know that NATI, the Nigerian Extractive Transparency Initiative, has publicly accessible beneficial ownership registry. But for one, this looks just at the companies in the oil and gas sector. For two, if you make the effort and if you dig deeper, you will see that most of the data actually shows at the legal owners. That means that it will just show you that the company XY registered in some tax haven somewhere abroad is owned by another company based in somewhere in London or wherever, but it just doesn't go to the beneficial owner, to those in Nigeria that really own the oil fields, the gas companies and all that. So I think, you know, we really have to push for more. We have to have a genuine dialogue with the governmental authorities. Not even the beneficial ownership registry is the end game. Excuse me. We have an active beneficial ownership registry, then we have not actually arrived. Then we have actually not arrived to the target. And this is just one example of many, and I think this is quite characteristic for the SDG process. Sometimes we are obsessed by the process itself, how we track the SDG indicators, how we measure the targets and all that, but we lose sometimes the sight of the actual goal here, and indicators, all these targets should tackle a real problem, and sometimes we are losing sight of it. So that would be the bigger point that I would like to make here. To go further, the second target that we look at in deep is reduction of bribery and other forms of corruption. I will not go here into the analysis of this. I think your bribery and you know, other forms of we call it petty corruption. Sometimes it's not that petty. But even there, we haven't really made much progress based on the data that we have. Let me just mention two indicators here: the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. You see on the left-hand side that in 2020, the last year measured, we have gone actually to the worst score since this administration came in place. We are somehow at the level of 2013. The trend, most importantly, is actually negative. So based on the perceptions of business people, of people who invest in Nigeria, Nigerians, and you know, for example, international business investors, corruption does not improve, rather the opposite. On the right-hand side, there is data from Afrobarometer, so an organization, Pan-African organization that specializes actually on data processing and data surveys. And even this data shows similar trend. You see that in 2020, a record number of respondents, 70%, said that the government fights corruption badly or very badly. This is again perception of the people on the ground, of the citizens of Nigeria, but of course it is significant. These perceptions don't come out of nothing. They are based on the real life, on the real experiences of people. Let me go further. I don't want to discuss too much particular sectors or thematic areas, but let me mention one, and this is something that especially those of you who are in Nigeria experience every day, and the trend is again quite negative. It is the security. The executive director, even Samuel Assimi, mentioned some of the figures that are quite horrific: the number of kidnappings, number of people killed every day. Why am I mentioning it here? Of course, SDG 16 looks at security to the great extent. We see a clear link, clear nexus between governance, security, and SDGs. Of course, there's no surprise. As security worsens, we are going away from reaching the SDG targets. So Nigeria risks at the moment really missing the SDG targets, even the most important ones, such as reduction of poverty. Of course, it's not just the insecurity, there are also some other factors, as for example, the COVID-19 crisis. This is a global thing that Nigeria could not influence, but we could see this trend starting already before. And while it is true that we have a robust SDG process in Nigeria, we are just not meeting the targets. It's just a fact. So as we speak, Nigeria has the largest proportion of people living in abject poverty. And unfortunately, this number, as perhaps the only big country in the world, is actually increasing. It is not decreasing. Even India, that used to be actually the unfortunate first country in the world with the highest number of poor people, has been actually overtaken in Nigeria, has been overtaken by Nigeria in this sad indicator. And we can go on, and of course there are some successes in, I think, in the over 169 indicators, but largely we are really risking that most of the SDG targets will be missed. This is just a fact that is supported by the figures generated by the Nigerian government. We think that the budget for security has a lot to do with it. You see on this chart that I'm presenting here that the military spending has actually increased significantly since 2008 or so. But we have sometimes the government acknowledges themselves that they cannot track large proportions of the military budget. They just cannot track what kind of equipment was purchased, where did this money go, which shows, of course, a number of things. So for one, there doesn't seem to be an effective or any oversight of military budgets. When you talk to the parliamentarians, they would say, many of them, quite clear that it is really difficult to track military budgets, if not impossible. And it seems that the more money Nigeria invests into security, the less security it gets. And of course, that influences almost all the SDGs, starting with SDG 1, going to the SDG 17. And if we don't put more transparency in the corruption in the security sector, we are unlikely to get more security, and we are unlikely to meet the SDG targets. So this is, I think, something that, of course, doesn't come as a surprise, but it is a fact that CISLAC has been discussing for many years now. We have, of course, the slash funds called security votes, which in my view, I have not really seen a clear instance where security votes would lead to more security. They lead to many things, starting for private corruption, going to pursuing private political goals, etc. There is absolutely no transparency in it. We are discussing 670 million a year at least. And why is Nigeria having it? Why do Nigerian taxpayers fund something that actually contributes to their insecurity, or at least doesn't seem to be improving it. Let me just wrap up. I really don't want to go too deep. The recommendations on the SDG process in these 3 targets are actually very similar to the 3 instances in the 3 years before. We are not discussing, any surprises here. It has been presented number of times before. I think the government acknowledges most of these things as well, but we are not, we don't seem to be making that much progress on it. Yeah. So the first point, focus on SDG targets instead of being too limited on the SDG process. The process is really just a vehicle that actually doesn't say much. It is the SDG targets that actually do the change, and we should not be wasting our time and resources too much on the SDG process. Build on existing platforms instead of creating new ones. This applies especially to the anti-corruption domain. So instead of creating new committees and new institutions, we should be improving those that already exist. It is really expensive to build institutions that are effective. We should be using those that are already there. My private opinion, as I have observed Nigeria over the years, Nigeria has actually too many institutions, at least at the federal level, that overlap mandates and that waste precious resources. It doesn't like institutions. A specific one, improve the beneficial ownership register. As I said, when it remains possible to hide money easily in Nigeria and outside, there is no way that corruption can be, the grand corruption can be eliminated. So we know that when it comes to corruption, at least grand part of it, procurement is actually the biggest generator, the biggest factor generating the vast sums that are that are sipped off from contracts on corruption into corruption avenues. And beneficial ownership would help great deal if you could easily track who really owns, who really gets the money at the end of the companies. That would, of course, help great deal. It is not just Nigeria's responsibility, it is collective responsibility, global responsibility. But of course, what Nigeria can achieve within their jurisdiction is something that we should advocate for. The second last recommendation, the main one, focus on procurement and avoid state capture. We have to recognize that when powerful networks capture legal frameworks and policy frameworks, it doesn't even need to come to corruption. You can pass a law that clearly benefits, aids corruption without actually violating any laws, but it still contributes to wastage of resources. We can go as an example, for example, the tobacco industry. It is, in Nigeria, a pack of cigarettes is one of the cheapest in the world. Why is it so? Because tobacco companies lobbied or bribed, as you wish, Nigerian lawmakers, or I don't know whom exactly, and tax burden for a pack of cigarettes is close to nothing. So in Germany, I don't know exactly, but pack of cigarettes is, I think, 6 or 7 euro, because there are huge taxes levied on these things. In Nigeria, it is exactly the opposite. And why is it so? We have to be asking these questions. And of course, the main conclusion of all of that, and we have been very consistent on this, is that unless there is somehow a resemblance of security, at least, there'll be no SDG progress. So I think we have to be very clear about that. And while there are some small achievements here and there, it is very clear that if the security situation does not improve, there will be very little SDG progress in 2030 and beyond. So there are no surprises here. I think we provide in the report quite clear evidence where we think that small steps could help to limit at least corruption in key sectors such as security. But I think we have to be very clear and very open about the facts that everybody can see on the ground. I would like to thank you at this point. I hope that once the final report is out, you will find time to read it. I think it is quite interesting read, and we hope that it will be an important policy feed and also vitally read by the community that you represent. Thank you very much. Samuel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Waslav, for that presentation. Up next, we would actually move on to the panel session. And on the panel session, this will be led by Accountability Lab Nigeria. We already have our panelists lined up, so I would like to hand over to Friday Ode to actually steer the session. Friday, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Samuel, and to the entire team at CISLAC. It's a great pleasure to work with you on this this SDG 16 Youth Hangout. We're very excited to be part of this, and congratulations, a big congratulations to your team for putting together the SDG 16 reports. We are happy to always support and work together on these issues to see how we can also create the impacts or the changes we want to see in the society. Also, a very good afternoon to everyone who has joined. We use this opportunity to thank you for being a part of this discussion. Without taking much time, it seems like we have an hour, 10 minutes. I'll give the floor briefly, just to make this as interesting as possible so we all don't get bored at some point. I'll give the panelists a 1 minute, 30 seconds opportunity to introduce themselves, to tell us that fantastic thing about themselves that we want to make. Let me see, Abraham, Uche, Damilola, Ifoma, Victoria. One thing that will make us want to meet you in real life. Tell us what you do and that one thing. So I'll give the floor to Shemia Michael, to Ifoma, and yeah, the other panelists on this call. Please go ahead. You have the floor. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Okay. You actually said we should make people laugh as if we are comedians. Yeah, I'm a community person. I live in the village, and it will be sweet for you to see me because I'll give you some village food to eat and connect you to the people at the very grassroots level. My name is Semir Michael. I lead the Dean Initiative. I also work with a huge network of young people across the country to monitor the local implementation of the SDGs and also implement a series of local connected development initiatives. Thank you so much, and congratulations to CISLAC. This is amazing.
If Former will go with you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And can you all hear me? Friday, please confirm if you can hear me.
Yeah, sure. I can hear you clearly, loud and clear.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Huge congratulations to CISLAC and Advocacy Lab on this, amazingly awesome report. When the highlights was being, discussed and provided, I just saw so many pinpoints, advocacy points that we civil societies can actually, take on board to actually advance what CISLAC and of course Accountability Lab has already started. So congratulations to the team that worked on this report. I know that's a really huge work to take on board, especially with all the constraints we've currently faced in this country. And my name is Ifoma Onyebuchi. I currently work as a program director at the Public and Private Development Center. I am not a comedian, but I of course, I love the work that I do. And I love that I'm also doing this work with support from other civil societies. We are like a family, we work to support each other. But one thing I keep saying is like, we're fighting one battle and hopefully we all will win the battle and achieve the ideal country we want for ourselves. So I'm very happy to be here with you and to also be speaking on the topic around procurement. And I'm so happy that procurement transparency is a recurring theme in all the presentations and discussions I've heard this morning. So I look forward to that. And I hope everybody stays back on the call to listen to us talk about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ifoma. Then we'll go to Ruth, Ruth Olofin from Clean Foundation. Go for it. After that, we are going to take Dr. Bala, who is our big boss from OSSAP. Ruth, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Olofin. I work at the Center for Law Enforcement Education in Nigeria, popularly known as the Clean Foundation. I'm the program manager there. I don't have much to make us laugh as it is, but just to say that one interesting thing about me is after all the English grammar presentation, sweetness, as soon as I get home, I'm turning a back. And my kids are running around, so I'm packing my kids and I'm running around making soup of sorts. Yeah, thank you.
Very much, Ruth. I was just looking at the number of people on this call. Maybe you should invite us someday to come and eat eba with you. Yeah. I'll move on to Dr. Bala. There's I don't know, permits me to use the word the big fish or the big boss, who covers all of us in the work we do around it. It gives me great pleasure to introduce. I think recently, with all thanks to CISLAC as well, Samuel had introduced me to Dr. Bala by email a couple of weeks ago. But yes, over to you, Dr. Bala. A briefing.
No, I think I will just mention my name and what I do in this space. My name is Bala Yunusa, and I'm the Senior Technical Advisor here, providing strategic guidance, overall implementation of the 2030 agenda. So I'm happy to be in the midst of colleagues. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bala. And once again, we welcome everybody to this discussion. The UN 2030 agenda emphasizes a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination. The theme of this year's meeting, is sustainable and resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic that promotes the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, building an inclusive and effective path for the achievement of the 2030 agenda in the context of the decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. We have been able to design this program to look at the Nigerian SDG 16 2021 shadow report, which looks at navigating the threats of insecurity and procurement corruption to a sustainable and resilient recovery. To help me start the discussion, I'll be turning over to Dr. Bala to let us know, we know the government has done So one of the reasons I say the big boss or the big fish, the government is supposed to steer us or guide us in the right direction. And we really want to commend the efforts of the OSSAP's office on the work they have done so far. We would like to hear the government's plan, their efforts so far, and the progress in attaining this UN 2030 agenda. If you can give us like an overview, we will take down notes and I'll come back to you for questions if you are still on the call. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think I won't miss this opportunity to reaffirm Nigeria's commitment to the overall implementation of the SDGs. Just recently, I think July, we launched a 10-year roadmap for the implementation of the SDGs, and it starts Nigeria Sustainable Development Goals Implementation Plan 2020 to 2030, navigating the decade of action for the global goals. What this plan does is to carefully review the past, the last 5 years, discuss the present, and also project the future. So let me review the past. At the beginning of the implementation of the SDGs, Nigeria faced the implementation of the SDGs into 3 main phases. Phase 1 will be building on existing foundation, advocacy, and sensitization for the global goals. Between 2016 and 2020, to be precise.
Please kindly keep your mics muted, please. Thank you very much.
Okay. So when we face that implementation, so the first phase will be between 2016 to 2020. The second phase will be 2021 until 2026, 25 ending, when we hope to scale up implementation of the SDGs, both at the national and at the subnational level. The third phase will be between 2026 to 2030, where we hope to accelerate whatever we must have scaled up between 2021 to 2025. Okay. Now let it also be on record that the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, OSAP SDG, was established with 4-fold mandates. One is that of strategic planning, coordination, and guidance. Secondly, that of representation, advocacy, and partnership building. The third one is that of resource mobilization and management. And then the last one is that of monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. And this includes national and global reporting. The OSAP SDG does not attempt to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is what this plan is about to do. It is about mainstreaming and integration of the SDGs into the medium as well as long-term development plan of the national as well as the subnational government. It is also about the integration of the SDGs into the relevant ministries, departments, and agencies' sectoral policies and plans, so that not only that we are implementing the SDGs from where there is capacity from the ministries, departments, and agencies, both at the national and at the subnational level, but also we're doing resource mobilization, because we are then saying the ministries, departments, and agencies should use their traditional budgetary sources to fund the implementation of the SDGs. So let it be clear that OSAP SDGs is not implementing the SDGs, it's coordinating the overall implementation of the SDGs. Where the work is happening is, for example, Ministry of Health. In their sectoral policies and plans, they must integrate SDG 3 and the component of SDG 2 on nutrition, as well as the component of sanitation and hygiene in SDG 6. The same with Federal Ministry of Environment. When we are crafting sectoral policies and plans in the Ministries of Environment and the Federal Ministry of Environment, as well as the subnational counterpart, we should craft policies and programs that address all the 5 environmental related SDGs, beginning from 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. The same with Federal Ministry of Education. When we do this, this is the entire concept of mainstreaming, acceleration, and policy support. And therefore, by way of overview, during the first phase, which is what we have just finished, let me recap what we have been able to achieve during this last 5 years. This office has been able to establish similar institutional frameworks across the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Therefore, you have the Office of the Special Assistant or Special Advisor to the Executive Governor on SDGs across the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Okay, we have successfully realigned, which is very important, the national statistical system with the requirements and indicators of the SDGs. We now know which ministry, department, and agency is responsible for reporting which of the 230 key performance indicators to the National Bureau of Statistics. So we also know that out of these 270 key performance indicators, 230 key performance indicators, almost 70% will come from the administrative system of statistics. That is the periodic running of the ministries, department, and agency. Only about 25% will come from the periodic surveys of the, for example, the living standard survey, the demographic health survey, or the multi-indicator cluster survey, as the case may be. And about 5% will just be dry. So we have successfully customized and domesticated the Nigeria Integrated Sustainable Development Simulation Model, which is a homegrown analytical tool for SDG-based planning, both at the national and at the subnational level. We have delivered successfully the first and second voluntary national review, the first one in 2017, which you could agree with me, it was just 1 year into the implementation. And that review basically highlighted the key institutional frameworks that have been established to guarantee effective implementation of the SDGs. The second one was last year, which was evidence-based and aimed to show how we were able to integrate the SDGs into our national development planning using the ERGC as a case study. Now, next year, we hope to present the third voluntary national review. In between, we have been able to institutionalize flagship programs that will help, especially the subnational government, to fast-track the implementation of the SDGs. Now, with technical partnership with UNDP, we are supporting the states to do SDG-based medium and long-term development plans. We are currently working with 11 states to ensure that they craft their medium-term and long-term development plans based on their state development priorities. And once we achieve this by, say, 2026, even if it is 50% of Nigerian states that have developed either a medium or long-term development plan that is SDG compliant, then we will have achieved a lot in terms of integration and mainstreaming. And whenever we integrate and mainstream, we are doing resource mobilization. Nigeria is one of the pioneer countries that is designing the Integrated National Financing Framework, INFF, which is an analytical tool also to, if you like, operationalize the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing Development, trying to map out the entire financing ecosystem in Nigeria, to identify the gaps, where will the resources come from, both public and private sector, as well as the impact investment, innovative financing mechanisms generally that can support the attainment of the SDG. The entire budget of the Federation in 2020 was about 20 trillion naira. The federal component was about 10.8 trillion, and the 36 states combined was about 9.2 trillion. Combined, these resources are insufficient to adequately finance the implementation of the SDGs in Nigeria. So we are moving from funding to financing, and we are establishing the right institutional framework to guarantee that. And that is what the office is predominantly doing. Now, with the launching and the drafting of this 10-year roadmap that will navigate us into the decade of action, which is actually here before me. I don't know if you can see it. It was just launched, and the hard copies and even the electronic copies are available on our website. We will see vividly how we intend to get the next 10 or now 9 years into 2030 in terms of the sort of engagement with state and non-state actors, in terms of strengthening our coordinating capacity, in terms of the integration of the SDGs into the medium-term National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 and Nigeria Agenda 2050. All are inspired by the SDG model, which makes the national plan SDG-based, and also inspired also by the cardinal objective of this administration. So this is what we are saying, that by the time we integrate, we mainstream these SDGs into our sectoral policies and plans, both at the national and at the subnational level, then what we will be doing is looking for incremental resources to enable us fast track the attainment. Having said that, we have also recognized that despite this modest progress, dwindling financial resources, um, continued insecurity in some parts of the country, and COVID-19 pandemic have all combined to slow down progress towards the overall implementation of the SDGs in Nigeria. And therefore, to leave no one behind, we need the expertise of all stakeholders, the public, the private sector, the scientific community, the civil society, and even concerned citizens in support of the 2030 agenda that leaves no one behind. So it is the work that we must all do. When we see something, we must say something. The anti-corruption agencies are doing their coming down to SDG 16 and the targets we're talking about today. The Nigerian police, the military establishment, the security agencies, the anti-corruption agencies are all doing their best. But it is their best might not just be good enough. But if all stakeholders work together to ensure that we address these challenges that are before us, then we can be on track to achieve the SDGs. I would like to stop here and then take one or two questions, and then I will like to crave the indulgence of the moderator to leave. I will be traveling to Lagos anytime from now, and then so I would like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bala. Very insightful. I'm happy to hear some of the propositions you made around the national and subnational, the second phase, which runs from 2021 to 2025, and to note that OSSAP doesn't implement, but it mainstreams the SDGs into government plans and integrates into government policies. But the question for me will be the progress on that, based on how have we been able to achieve which SDG, the progress from the targets which we have. Are there any access reports we can use to say Nigeria has gotten up to 50% to 70%? Because this looks like, how do we work together, like to leave no one behind, work with civil society, work with the private sector, like the shadow report, the SDG 16 shadow report by CISLAC, it just tells us the progress. So how do we have any access to any reports which can show that? But however, I'll open the floor to one question before Dr. Bala jumps off. If anybody can jump in, if you have a question, you can raise your hand.
No, you just asked a question. Should I intervene?
No,
I've just asked me a question.
No, I'm just trying to put to the everybody on the call to see if anybody add, and you take both. I will assume there's none, so you can go.
So that's why
you are on mute. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. You know?
We can hear you now.
That's why I said the first phase was institutionalizing the effective implementation of the SDG. So the realignment of the national statistical and indicators of the SDGs is on annual basis. Progress or no progress, overall implementation of the SDGs. Some things that come from the sources, but as custodian statistics, it is only national that will tell us today where, for example, on SDG 1, on zero poverty, okay, because they do the every 5 years and release the report. You can actually use the 2020 value because the living 2020 came out just before that VNR. So the VNR looked at the 7 priority reporting SDG, SDG 1, 3, 4, 5, 8, 16, and 17. So you can find where we stand as last year when we voluntary national review to the high-level political forum on that. And obviously, some of this you can find them from other sources, World Bank, even IMF, and in terms of some around SDG 8 that has to do with economic growth, employment rate, and all that. But what we will do with the complete realignment is that on annual we'll have a progress report that will make available to Nigerians where we stand. Every year that we don't that we do the voluntary national review, it will be embedded in the VNR. But every year that we don't present VNR, we give progress reports that will update Nigerians on where we stand. We wouldn't have done that in the last 5 years without the national statistical system. It took us 2 years with financial support from PS to be able to realign the national statistical system. As I talk to you now, the report is ready. Administrative clearance to publish the report. Okay, that will be it. So for us in our coordinating role, we made in the first phase by the sort of institutional mechanism we established and the policies and programs that have been institutionalized to ensure that this scaling up implementation, both at the national and at the subnational level, it's guaranteed. And then hopefully peace and security will prevail on the land. Pandemics like COVID-19 will not come to challenge us again, or when they come, we will be prepared to address the challenge. We'll build back better and be on track to achieve the 2030 agenda for sustainability. Thank you.
A big thank you, Dr. Bala. I think we should allow to catch up with your flight. It looks like somebody has another question for you, but we can start this while you're away.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any. I'm happy to answer one more.
Robert says, I just want to ask if there's any measurable factor to ascertain the progress made so far on said.
I thought I just answered that question.
I think I should. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bala.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Interestingly, we have a conversation which has been as a burner for Nigeria, as the case may be, talking about procurement and contracting transparency. How do we begin to improve this contracting processes to ensure citizens get the benefits or the dividend case may be? We have Ifeoma Onyebuchi from PPDC to us on the essential steps in attaining Agenda 2030 in this regard. Ifeoma, please forgive us. We hope to close this meeting by 2 p.m. beyond the normal time. We will give you between 5 to 7. We can also have other speakers join in and then have a session for question and answer. Please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll try as much as I can to make do with the time allotted to me. And just to say thank you to the last speaker, if you're still on the call. That was really insightful to hear you talk about the steps made by the government. And we're very happy to hear all those good reports that came from you. So yes, I would just talk about Vision Agenda 2030. How do we ensure that all persons, all humans on the face of the earth, thank you so much, that everybody enjoys peace and prosperity? How do we ensure that all that happens? And I think it all begins with our procurement process in Nigeria. I'm very happy that the SDG goal 16 is also very huge about contract transparency and procurement transparency. So that's really what I would love to be sharing from. And I think the first question from me would be why transparency in public procurement? We just saw the report that Vaclav also presented, looking at how much Nigeria loses on procurement-related corruption, looking at how much Africa loses and what percent that takes out of that huge chunk of money, and what are the triggers for those indicators. What do we need to do right, and how do we make sure that we put mechanisms in place to ensure that we, block those gaps, close those loops, and be on our way to attaining the vision 2030 if really we want to get to that point. And one of the things for me is why for us in Nigerian and also as participants of the SDG, why procurement transparency? And I think it's because we all are people who pay taxes. And we also know that the public sector organizations are spending public money, and they have a legal and moral responsibility to ensure that the monies are spent as carefully as possible. And we also have a constitution, a legal framework that talks about the primary responsibility of the government in terms of security and social welfare. And we also know about a national budget that takes a huge chunk of our money, which are also being done. If we look at the budget, huge percentage of that budget goes into public procurement. And it's very important that the revenues we are accruing and the monies that are being spent are done in a way that is inclusive, is transparent, and the resources are just used. And not only that we have value for money. So if you look at the core principles of the Public Procurement Act 2007, it talks about competition, it talks about transparency, it talks about value for money. And speaking from a civil society whose work, PPDC, I work for the Public and Private Development Center, who has spent years monitoring contract implementation. We could tell you that, how the monies are being spent, looking at infractions and inadequacies across the contracting value chain, and being able to make sense of how much we spend annually and the value of the services we are getting, and why we need to kind of adapt and reform our processes just to make sure that the monies that we are being spent in a way that we also get value for those funds. And looking at the objectives, of course, I think I will just keep this slide because of time and jump to mechanism for accountability under the Public Procurement Act. Now, Nigeria has the Public Procurement Act 2007, which I'm also very happy that is under review to be amended. But if you look at what we currently have, we have mechanisms in the law that allows for monies to be, that allows for accountability. And beyond the act also, we have the Freedom of Information Act, which also has different sections that allows for data to have access to the way the MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies, how they carry out the procurement, and their responsibility to be, inclusive, to be transparent, and also to be accountable on how they use public resources. And I also think that there are also other platforms that also promote fiscal accountability. We have the Fiscal Responsibility Act, besides the FOI that I talked about, and also the Public Procurement Act. We have the Code of Conduct Bureau, Act 2, and we also have the Open Government Partnership, which Nigeria also became the 7th member, I think, in 2016. And one unique thing about the OGP is it provides, so I think the OGP personally makes up for some of the things that we couldn't achieve through the laws, right? Because it provides a unique opportunity for governments and civil societies and other wider stakeholders to sit down at the table to say, these are the goals we want to achieve, and set a reform goal, set a reform agenda, which also can border on the SDGs. We want to tackle poverty, we want to tackle gender issues, we want to tackle issues around transparency, whatever issue it is that we want to tackle. It provides a platform for government and civil society who has expertise around those issues to come together and develop a plan on a roadmap on how to tackle it. And I think OGP has been utilized so much by Nigeria to achieve all these indicators. And I also think there's also lots of opportunity that are being jumped on by different civil society, advocacy, mobilizing civic action, and also monitoring. But again, there's a need for government to also be transparent. And being transparent allows for us to participate. For example, if we don't have access to our national budget, or Nigeria doesn't have a mechanism to disclose information about the budget appropriation, and the procurement that are being carried out by the MDAs, then how do we engage? Engagement comes with transparency and accountability. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us to have access to all these multiple things and be able to work together, do a proper oversight, and also suggest and recommend on what ways that the government can also improve in all this. And I would just jump to the slide that talks about ways to improve procurement transparency and performance. And I without overemphasizing on this, we know that procurement is *1 risk of corruption and fraud in government. We have seen indicators, we have seen, we have seen reports, we have also lived the experiences by monitoring public procurement. And I think that one of the best steps that Nigeria has taken in recent times is being a member of the OGP, but also adopting the open contracting data standards. And just to also say that it's also part of the commitment that Nigeria made at the Anti-Corruption Summit in 2016, where Nigeria committed to be a member of the OGP alongside adopting the open contracting data standard. And now OCDS, it's all about publishing contractual information using data standards in a way that the whole contracting value chain is linked across the stages, from budget to tender, to award, to contract, and then down to implementation, in a way that some of the issues we've talked about, for example, disclosure. OCDS addresses the issue of disclosure, because you can't have a data standard that is not built upon technology. So you're using technology to link the stages of contracting, and the information have to be proactively disclosed. Now we know that the FOI, the section 2 of that law, talks about proactive disclosure. Now OCDS, addresses that, because what that means is, from the user department, from the planning stage, everything has to be put out by the MDA themselves. Now, what it also does, it enables a wider stakeholder analysis and critique of that process before there's any decay in the system. So you have access to quickly identify the gaps before things get worse. And then you have people from different walks of life, monitoring the process.
If I'm sorry, time. Quickly, maybe we'll give like a minute to round up here. Thank you.
Awesome. And so the point here, I'm so sorry, but the point here is that if we have to achieve the Vision 2030, it's important that we, improve procurement outcomes, making sure that people have access to the data, that the procurement process is managed in a way that public resources are accounted for by the government, and that we have access to the data and also to the process that leads to the improved service delivery. Because in that way, we can save more money, we can monitor the system, we can create a watchdog system that everybody identifies the loops, both the journalists and civil societies and other people in the society, the way that we can save more money and then achieve, a sustainable society like what we tend to aim for. So I hope I'm able to run through the slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again. I've not seen you in a long time, but wonderful presentation. I like the fact, like you've already stated what it is. It's about improving access to data and the process of the procurement process to ensure service delivery is achieved for every citizen, every Nigerian citizen, and how we will ensure we also save money for the country, because we've seen too much of mismanagement of funds in the society and with government MDAs. But yes, we'll come back to you with a couple of questions. Let's quickly jump on to Ruth from Clean Foundation. She will be talking about actionable steps in improving peace and security to attaining the UN 2030 agenda. Over to you, Ruth. Sorry for the mix-up, but yes, we're glad to hear from you on your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, once again. So I've been asked to focus on actionable steps to improve peace and security in Nigeria to attain the SDGs 2030. I'm going to tie my intervention very closely to SDG Goal 16, which talks about peace, justice, and strong institutions. Very quickly, a lot has been said, but within this specific focus of peace and security, you will agree with me that the present challenges we are facing in terms of security challenges in the country, new and existing threats, there's a need for us to reevaluate our approach towards addressing all of these challenges. The very first step for me is looking at how we can engender a community-centered approach to conflict resolution. Within that, what you have seen is that there's a lot of document strategies that are being developed, which talks beautifully about the need to bring the people, making our approaches to be community-centered. But in terms of real implementation, you find that experts, are still brought to the table to design all of this framework. And in fact, a lot of this is becoming what I would call Abuja intervention. So in Zamfara, in Niger State, in the Kaduna, in Katsina, and all other states that are facing some form of security threats, a lot of conversation are happening in Abuja, which for me should not be. So why don't we focus on how some of this conversation can be, established at the community level, such that the community, those who are affected by this security crisis, are actually brought to the table to address the concerns, and then, of course, give you community-led solutions, what they think are the issues, and how they can, we all can collaboratively address these concerns. And within that, again, is state needs to change the current state-centric approaches. So you see that where there is a lot of conflicts or crises, our immediate response is to quickly deploy the military, to those contexts, without not looking at what other alternatives, soft approaches that we can deploy to address these concerns. So for me, a community-centered approach is very, very key in addressing security threats and bringing peace, to Nigeria towards our agenda 2020. Within that, and again, if you look at the targets in these goals, there's the issue of inclusive society. So how do we also make sure that these platforms that are community-led also look at the gender dimensions of conflict? Because a lot has been said across scholars, studies have established the fact that the threats that we face in Nigeria, for instance, have a lot of gender implications or affect women a lot. When we talk about gender, we're not only referring to women, but it tends to exacerbate the worsening condition that this crisis places on the women. So we need to bring women into the peace and conflict resolution platform to engender a balanced and more effective approach to our attempts, our efforts, both by the states or community stakeholders, to address conflict, to address security threats at those local level. Because again, these issues, the approach by security has been a standard approach. So I've always been at the forefront campaigning that, the security needs of both men, women, boys, and girls are very diverse and are not the same. So how do we begin to ensure that our services to the people, policing services, for instance, are a lot more responsive to the needs of women rather than go the standard approach. What we face, I would like again to talk about security sector reform and the need for police reform. What we face currently, this persistence of all of these threats and the new and emerging ones are indication of the fact that the security threats we are facing, the landscape is fast changing. And this makes a compelling case for us to review our current security architecture. In reviewing our security architecture, it's not about, okay, bringing in SDG, the military and all of that, and just having those high level conversations. But I'm saying that Nigeria is yet to have a holistic framework that captures how it intends to improve upon the security of the country, such that you are looking at the mandates of each organization and bring them vis-a-vis the tax environment. The tax environment here for me is the context in which each of these security institutions are delivering their mandate. If you look at what is happening in the case of the Nigerian police and even for the military, a lot has changed very fast. So how do we begin to match the fast changing tax environment vis-a-vis the mandate of each of these institutions, and as such, tailor interventions, tailor support them with resources, funding, or what have you, so that we are able to respond, effectively to the issues. At a fine point in the history of this country for us to, have a national policy on security sector reform. So what you see around Nigeria is that, you don't have a coordinated approach to, changing or reforming the security sector, even for police reform. You see successive IGPs come into office with their various agenda. You see the military head leadership come into office with their various agenda. And within that, the donors are also playing a very critical role. But I'm saying that when it comes to issues of resolving security threats and reforming institutions, national ownership is very, very key at that. But donors are coming with their own agenda, with their own framework, most of it that are Western influenced, and trying to see how you can bring that to changing the context in Nigeria. So there's a lot of challenge with that kind of process. So I think that our security sector policy needs to be locally initiated and locally developed and contextualized to the peculiar security threats that we face. In our drive to achieve peace and security towards 2030, there's a need to strengthen accountability structures. Accountability both, and this is a very important concept in peace and security discourse, accountability in terms of the costs, the resources, the conduct of those who we have mandated to act on our behalf in terms of security management, and also performance in the line of functions. So the backlash that you see that the police is having now, a lot of it is rooted in the impunity within security organizations. So police impunity, police brutality, and even for the military, a lot of rights violations are ongoing. And yet the country has set up accountability structures, the Police Service Commission, the Army Council, and even within the institutions, you have those internal structures. How effective has all of this, accountability mechanism been? How have these institutions hold to account those officers, those personnel that have violated the rights of the people? For me, I think that is a very, very conscious thing. It's about being, reflective. I listened to the presentation by the government rep in terms of what Nigeria is doing to achieve goal 20, the agenda towards 2030. Those are very, very beautiful. But the critical question for me is that within the MDAs, do you have personnel? Do you have persons who have the mandate to be monitoring, to say, as regards my jurisdiction, the Ministry of Justice, for instance, I am responsible for monitoring what the ministry does towards achieving the SDG goals. So that person becomes, a reporting officer, and then there is an M&E framework with which you are seeing your everyday activity where it is linking to each of these agendas. So I think that one of the challenges that we have in our quest towards addressing peace and security in this country is that our accountability mechanisms are still very, very weak. And what it does is that it just makes citizens to lose confidence within the system. So people tend to want to take laws into their hands, or even come up with alternatives. The police is even facing a greater challenge in the fact that people are no longer using the formal police, but are resorting to other, institutions or non-state actors that can provide policing services to it. All of the reports that we have had, the several panels, the Police Service Commission regularly meets, to look at infractions by the police. The Army Council, for those within the military, I give it to them. Their court martial, although we have challenged some of the process that it can be against human rights of the alleged suspect, but then theirs is a bit quicker. But for the Police Service Commission, you appear not to be seeing that swift response. So I think that there's a need to step back and reflect on how do we make each of these institutions that we have established, set in place to be more effective. Someone had said something earlier that, I think it was Vaclav, that Nigeria has too many institutions. So, and that has become a mechanism through which the government tries to dodge its responsibility. So if Nigerians come up today to say, oh, there's a lot of issues with regards A, B, C, D, the next thing the government does is first to set up a panel. And then the recommendations from the panel come out. There's the lack of political will to implement. And then it goes further to try to set up an institution. So the landscape in Nigeria in terms of peace, justice, security is just full of so many institutions, some with overlapping responsibilities, but yet, where is all of this leading to? So I think we are at the point is about 9 years in. By 2028, we should be asking ourselves, how far are we now towards the remaining 2 years to achieve all of this agenda? Critically for me,
thank you very much, Ruth. Your time is almost up, so you can just maybe round off. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry to cut
I have a written note I can always pass to Samuel, but I will not elaborate so much, but I think critically the issues of protection of human rights defenders and also the civic space is very, very important. And then the review of relevant laws, particularly if you look at the ACJA, I think this is about 6 years after the enactment of that law. What is happening? The prisons are still congested, and yet we have the Correctional Services Act that says that we can introduce non-custodian measures. If you continue to lump the prisons with criminals, those that are hardened and are not hardened for minor offenses, you run the risk of bringing into the society people who are angry against the system and will go at any length to foment trouble. Making our, and I'm rounding up now, making our democracy and governance work for people. The heart of security threats that we face today, you cannot remove the issue of poverty and unemployment questions. So there's a need to address all of that. And I think that, government, not just the security institutions, but all other institutions should come together to see what else can we do for our people, especially the vulnerable people, the large mass of unemployed youths that are just roaming the streets. Finally, for me, is to talk about our police and electoral system. It is still a winner-takes-all approach. And I think that this is inimical to deepening democracy and an inclusive system. We need to be able to come up with frameworks on how we can make the other party that has not won election to come to the table towards making governance work for the people. Because it's a winner-takes-all approach, people are fixated on that office and will do anything within the election itself to see that they get into trouble. Those activities have their conflict and security implications in terms of making the polity to be very, very tense. So I think all of these put together, if we are able to consciously take them step by step and see how we can, recalibrate, as it were, our drive, our attempts towards Agenda 2020. I think critically for me, we need to just move beyond just developing the frameworks, but to look at the process through which we can achieve that. Thank you so much.
A good learning for me personally. And also tying that to how we need to in this MDAs, which Vaclav has also pointed out that we have so many structures, so many institutions around government. We have the Orange reports, which is yet to be implemented. It's important we also know our roles in advocating for some of these issues. Quickly to Shamia Michael, one person I admire, a friend that's been doing this, let me call it street work for so many years, and us to do more. He'll be telling us how the SDG Development Network to attain the UN 2030. Shamia, over to you.
Thank you. So I hope it's not a sin not to talk too much, because I see the two people that have spoken before me got a lot to say. Ruth said something that most of the intervention that now comes to table can be referred to as Abuja. Is it Abuja conversation or Abuja intervention? I don't know how she put it exactly. It just interprets to me the fact that the center really do not know or do not agree that there is need for spread in the actions we take if we actually want to curb the things that affect us collectively. Unfortunately, the concentration has always been, and this has nothing to do, this is not exclusive to the government alone per se, even though the government have huge resources to multiply their efforts across zones or communities where most of the things that affect people actually take place. But even the organizations, the organizations that are on the field, the big organizations, they have huge resources. Unfortunately, they do not have huge network. They do not have huge human resources that can be everywhere to report, real-time situations on the field. Hence, the need to talk about the issue of network, building a strong and formidable network to actually gather the type of, action, reports, data, information that are needed to advance the reality of the progress we want to see in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. One thing that is important is confusion in data. So, because I work with a huge number of young people across states, different networks, one thing I notice is the poor competence in their data gathering, management, interpretation, and these guys try a lot to say they are doing a lot of work, but they are very poor in terms of capacity to access data. They cannot build data by themselves. Even when they have access to some of the data some bigger organizations push out, they have difficulties in actually interpreting these data to allow it affect the type of work or the work they do. So this is a big problem. And eventually, look at the type of shadow report that CISLAC has been producing for a couple of years now. Then I think CISLAC should also move for that to also evaluate how useful are these reports to the people. I'm not even saying the community people, I'm saying people in the development sector. How many people use this report? There should be a way that CISLAC be able to galvanize its usage, especially when it comes to getting these across networks. How many networks do CISLAC have access to? Are these networks the type of networks who believe in the independence of the work they do themselves, or who also believe in the cross-fertilization of resources? If CISLAC generates a shadow report, is it something that, apart from the fact that other organizations join efforts to attend the launching like this, do they go back to make use of such reports? Do they share it? Do they adopt it in implementing or in formulating some of the actions they are taking, or design in the design of some of the programs they are doing? These are some of the critical steps or things that bothers us, especially people who work with networks. To build networks is becoming more difficult these days because everybody is asking what is in need. What is in need for me? And this is clear. We don't bring people together, harness their intellectuals, and then off we go. People believe that, especially organizations that are running a lot of stores, they have huge resources, and then they are trying to manage their resources, and they just form kind of networks, and wanting to use people's head, all this kind of a thing. There's a huge gap in terms of trust, information development, capacity building, in terms of how to enhance the ability of each other to trust and depend on the type of work that we do. I mean, when the report was being reviewed earlier in the program, I was actually looking at, because we actually are working on how to build the capacity of some of the people we work with in developing some of these grassroots data and report collection. I've been trying to see how I pick one or two things. So basically, my concern and my prescription is simple. Yeah, we have to begin to sieve, as in we have to begin to put into categories the type of networks we get ourselves or we are affiliated to. There are big networks who believes in the independence of their own work. No matter how beautiful our work or our such, let's say, give example of this shadow report is, there are big organizations that CISLAC is partnering with that will not refer to their reports or make use of them, because they also are doing something they believe is almost similar, or possibly they will also want to promote in that in advancing their own work. And then we have huge local community-based networks whose capacity needs to be improved, who we need to find a way to groom to see and have access to the type of data and reports that we generate, and also develop their capacity in such a way that they can also begin to have ability to generate data, interpret them, and apply them to advance the collective work that we are doing. I believe Accountability Lab, for instance, we necessarily do not need to be in every state of the country to access the type of information they need to advance their work. There are possible networks that can enable them to achieve that. But strategically, as organizations continue to grow and improve, there must be something we are ready to do for these networks that we will continue to identify, that will make them rely on us and trust working with us to be able to also sacrificially, do certain things for us that will advance the robustness of the work we are going to be doing on the field. Because at the moment, my greatest pain is when we go out of the country and we attend global events or activities, and they begin to present reports about the performance of the SDG or the development indices in Nigeria. You will just be imagining, is it the same Nigeria you are coming from, or they're speaking about another Nigeria that, okay, yeah, I actually agree, things are really bad. But it's more difficult when other people tell your story in such a way that it makes you feel so uncomfortable, but you do not have enough capacity or ability to tell the story you will have loved to tell. It makes a stupid or it makes a big ridicule of us when the story that is being told again and again and again about us is the fact that we are almost either at the same spot or we are actually even retrogressing. Yet each of us are spending hundreds of millions every year in terms of donor, in terms of funding and resources. And it just means as if everything we do not actually lift or shift the boundary of the progress we want to record. So it borders on how synergetic or how connected we are working together to ensure that we have we have a coordinated reporting system, a coordinated data system, a coordinated ability across board, building strategic network that can, whatever CISLAC dispense at the end of this report, immediately translate to what this numerous network will embrace and begin to work with, and then others will dish their own, and then in a coordinated manner, if I am talking anywhere around the world, I make creditable reference to what these organizations have been able to put together to advance the cause of the work we are doing together in Nigeria. I think, yeah.
Maybe please your time, so we can.
I'm actually done anyway. I hope, yeah, finally, I hope that we will learn from our repeated ways of doing what we do and come back together to lend hands to each other and work together more to achieve a coordinated output that we expect. Thank you, Ode.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. I like the fact you talked about grassroots organizations and how or create a spread of our work with by engaging them, and also improving the SDG agenda 2030 agenda by that process. I have limited time, which looks like 5 minutes. Just a quick run through at the to see if we have questions, because I'm not sure we'll be able to take any question at the moment, given we have 5 minutes to 2 p.m. But yes, a big thank you to everyone that has participated and to the feedback we've received. We're happy to share contacts from CISLAC, contacts from the panelists, contacts from OSSAP, from Clean Foundation, from Dean Initiative, and from PPDC, in case anyone needs to connect the conversation forward. But however, I will put it back to my friends, partners at CISLAC, so we can have closing remarks. Once again, congratulations on the SDG 16 shadow reports. We are happy to join you guys in whatever way in dissemination. Thank you once again and congratulations. Over to you, Samuel or Emir or our remarks.
Thank you very much, Ode, for that. I think I would, I don't know if the ED is around, because I know he had another meeting. So in the absence of the ED, I think I'll just give I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And quickly, before we just wrap up, we have someone with us, Samuel Kaninda. Samuel is the regional advisor of Transparency International in Africa. I don't know, Samuel, if you have something to just say before we wrap up.
Thanks, Samuel. Greetings, everyone. Not much to say. It was good for us to listen and hear the various perspectives, and we look forward to continuing to engage with all of you colleagues on this very important matter, because we all want to be able to say that substantial progress has been achieved by the time we reach 2030. There's still a lot of work that we need to do, as we have heard from various colleagues who have come in terms of coordinating our efforts, looking at the resourcing of these efforts, but also the space that we need as non-state actors to be able to continue to bring our conversation, our contributions, sorry. So it's been good to be part of the conversation, although I caught it underway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Thank you all for joining. With this, we've come to the end. So we'd like to thank our panelists. We'd like to thank Accountability Lab and, of course, our colleagues for joining us. Thank you very much, and see you next time for another edition of SDG Youth Hangout. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, CISLAC and Accountability Lab. Bye-bye. See you soon.